I smoothed my hands over the silky fabric of my wedding dress, a soft smile playing on my lips as I admired the intricate lace detailing. This was the moment I had dreamed of, marrying into wealth and status, leaving my humble roots behind. But little did I know, the path ahead was paved with humiliation and heartbreak. The lavish engagement party was in full swing, champagne flowing freely as Jake's privileged friends and family mingled. I felt out of place amidst the opulence, my modest upbringing a stark contrast to their world of inherited affluence. Still, I plastered on a smile, determined to win their acceptance. That's when Richard, Jake's imposing father, stepped forward, his expression one of thinly veiled disdain. "Welcome to the family, for now," he announced with a cruel smirk. "Let's see if this charity case can meet our standards." The room fell silent, all eyes on me as my face burned with shame. Jake shifted uncomfortably, but said nothing to defend me against his father's classist jabs. In that moment, I realized the true depths of Richard's contempt for my background. As the party resumed, I found myself reminiscing about how Jake and I first met. He had been so charming, showering me with affection and promises of a better life. But over time, his true colors emerged: the controlling behavior, the belittling comments about my modest means. I had chosen to ignore the red flags, blinded by my desperation to escape poverty. Later that night, Jake tried to apologize for his father's behavior, but the damage was done. The man I had fallen for was gone, replaced by someone who enabled his family's cruelty towards me. A gnawing sense of dread settled in my gut. If this was just the engagement party, what horrors awaited at the wedding itself? Growing up, I never imagined I'd be planning a lavish wedding fit for royalty. My childhood home was a cramped apartment where every penny counted. Mom worked double shifts as a waitress, while Dad juggled odd jobs to keep us afloat. Yet they instilled in me the belief that hard work and determination could unlock a better future. That future seemed tantalizingly close when I met Jake at the local community college. With his expensive sports car and designer clothes, he reeked of money and privilege. But he charmed me with his easy smile and stories of traveling the world. I was smitten, envisioning myself escaping the cycle of poverty. Jake's father, Richard, was far less enamored when we brought up marriage. "You can't be serious," he scoffed during a disastrous family dinner. "Marrying some bargain basement girl from the wrong side of the tracks?" Jake shifted uncomfortably, his eyes downcast. "Dad, don't be like that. Ava's amazing." "Amazing at digging her claws into you for your money, you mean?" Richard sneered at me. "I forbid this circus act of a wedding from happening under my roof." Tears stung my eyes, but I refused to show weakness. "With all due respect, it's not your decision. We're both adults capable of making our own choices." "Then you can pay for this sham of a wedding yourself," Richard retorted. "Don't expect a dime from me for some deadbeat's daughter." The venom in his voice shook me to my core. This was the man I hoped to call family, a cold-hearted elitist who viewed me as subhuman filth. Over the following weeks, Richard's disdain only grew more overt. He nitpicked every minor wedding detail, from the venue to the flower arrangements. "This is a disgrace to our family name," he'd mutter under his breath whenever I was within earshot. I confided in Jake, hoping he'd have my back against his father's relentless torment. But he just shrugged it off. "You know how he gets. Don't take it personally." That's when the first seeds of doubt took root. Was tying myself to this entitled family worth enduring their abuse? I pushed those doubts aside, convincing myself I could tough it out as long as I had Jake by my side. Little did I know, the worst was yet to come, a reckoning that would push me to the brink and set the stage for an unthinkable act of revenge. The days leading up to the wedding were a blur of last-minute preparations and mounting dread. Richard's contempt only seemed to intensify, his snide remarks cutting deeper each time. I found myself dreading our interactions, bracing for the next insult about my pedestrian tastes or lowbrow background. It all came to a head during the final dress fitting. As I admired the intricate beadwork on my gown, Richard barged into the boutique, his face thunderous. "You conniving little grifter," he spat, thrusting a crumpled document in my face. "Did you think you could keep this buried forever?" My heart pounded as I scanned the pages, a decades-old arrest record detailing a misdemeanor charge from my turbulent teenage years. An act of desperation to keep a roof over my family's head, but one that could shatter my dreams if exposed. "So this is the caliber of woman you're shackling yourself to?" Richard turned to Jake, who had trailed in behind him. "A criminal from the dregs of society?" Jake's expression was inscrutable. "Ava, what is all this about?" I opened my mouth, but no words came out. How could I explain the complexities of poverty and sacrifice to those who never had to struggle? Richard seized the opportunity, his voice dripping with venom. "Mark my words, this sordid affair ends now. Unless—" He leaned in close, his hot breath on my face. "You sign an airtight prenup, one that protects every last penny of my fortune when this inevitable dumpster fire inevitably implodes." Bile rose in my throat as the gravity of his words hit me. He was willing to publicly humiliate me, to trample on my fragile dreams, all to maintain his twisted sense of superiority. "And if I refuse," I managed to choke out, "then this lovely paper trail will be the first thing your precious husband sees on your wedding day." Richard's smile was chilling, along with copies for all our esteemed guests to admire. In that moment, something inside me snapped. The months of denigration, the constant belittling, the unbridled cruelty, it all came rushing forth in a tidal wave of rage. Before I could stop myself, my hand lashed out, slapping Richard squarely across his smug face. "You evil, miserable bastard!" Jake rushed forward, grabbing my arms as Richard cupped his stinging cheek, his eyes widening in shock. "You'll regret this, you insolent wench." As security ushered us out, I caught a glimpse of my distorted reflection in the boutique window. The woman staring back was a stranger, her face contorted in anguish, her body trembling with equal parts fury and despair. This was a turning point, I realized. I could either surrender to Richard's twisted demands or take a stand, no matter the cost. And as Jake led me away in stunned silence, I knew deep down that my path had been chosen. I stormed into Marcus's apartment, my chest heaving and tears streaking my cheeks. He took one look at my disheveled appearance and ushered me inside, his brow furrowed with concern. "Ava, what happened? You look like you've been through hell." The words tumbled out in a torrent as I recounted the horrific confrontation with Richard, his vile threats, his callous disregard for my dignity. By the time I finished, Marcus's hands were clenched into white-knuckled fists. "That pretentious prick has gone too far this time," he seethed. "First he treats you like garbage, and now he's trying to blackmail you into signing away your rights?" I nodded miserably, feeling the weight of Richard's ultimatum pressing down on me. "I don't know what to do, Marcus. If I refuse, he'll ruin everything. The wedding, my relationship with Jake." "Screw the wedding," Marcus exploded, startling me with the ferocity of his outburst. "And screw that entitled bastard and his snotty family." He paced back and forth, running an agitated hand through his hair. "You've bent over backwards trying to appease them, and look where it's gotten you. Disrespected and degraded at every turn." Grasping my shoulders, Marcus locked eyes with me, his gaze intense. "You're not some doormat for them to walk all over, Ava. It's time to show that pompous ass that we don't take shit from anyone, family, money, or not." A glimmer of determination flickered to life inside me, fanning the flames of the anger still simmering from my confrontation with Richard. Marcus was right. I had cowered for too long, desperately seeking their acceptance at the expense of my self-worth. "You're saying I should fight back?" I asked, my voice trembling yet resolute. "Take the battle to them for once?" Marcus's expression was grim, but unwavering. "I'm saying it's long past time we stop playing by their rules. If Richard wants a war, we'll give him one he'll never forget." His next words sent an electrifying chill down my spine. "I'll dig up every last skeleton in that bastard's closet if that's what it takes to bring him down." In that moment, the path ahead crystallized with brutal clarity. There would be no more placating, no more hollow apologies or hollow compromises. The gloves were finally coming off. Consequences be damned. As I looked at my brother, my fiercest protector and closest confidant, I saw the future unfolding. We would band together, unified in our quest to dismantle the Hollister Empire from the inside out, and Richard would soon learn that hell hath no fury like a woman repeatedly denied her rightful place. The days ticked by in a blur as Marcus compiled his dossier on Richard Hollister, meticulously unearthing every sordid secret and unscrupulous dealing. The man's carefully curated facade was rapidly crumbling under the weight of cold, hard evidence. "This is just the tip of the iceberg," Marcus muttered grimly, shuffling through stacks of documents detailing shady business transactions, undisclosed offshore accounts, and more. "The old bastard's got more skeletons in his closet than a haunted house." I pored over the damning paper trail with a mixture of grim satisfaction and simmering rage. So this was the great Richard Hollister. Upstanding pillar of society by day, duplicitous con man by night. The revelation failed to surprise me. Wealthy elites always played by their own set of rules. As the wedding day loomed, I found myself wavering between icy resolve and overwhelming dread. Part of me longed to call the whole thing off, to wash my hands of the Hollister name forever. But the other part, the part that had seethed in silent humiliation for far too long, burned with the white-hot need to make Richard pay. Marcus must have sensed my turmoil. "Having second thoughts?" he asked one evening as we pored over the final pieces of our meticulously constructed case against Richard. I worried my lower lip, considering my response carefully. I'm not sure I can go through with it. Hurting Jake, becoming the kind of vengeful person I despise." "Hurting Jake?" Marcus arched an incredulous eyebrow. "After everything his father has put you through, he's lucky you haven't pressed charges for emotional distress and defamation of character." His words rang brutally true. For too long, I had internalized the toxic notion that I was the wrongdoer, that I somehow deserved the onslaught of cruelty for daring to rise above my station. But no more. "You're right," I said, my voice hardening with resolve. "I didn't ask for any of this. Richard brought this on himself with his arrogance and bigotry." A grim smile played across Marcus's lips. "Then let's make sure the Hollisters reap what they've sown, once and for all." The morning of the wedding arrived in a swirl of nervous energy and giddy anticipation. As I slipped into my gown, Marcus gave me one last conspiratorial nod. "It's showtime," he murmured. "You ready to burn that son of a bitch's kingdom to the ground?" I met his gaze steadily, feeling an uncharacteristic surge of power course through my veins. "More than ready," I replied, steeling myself for the biggest performance of my life. "Richard's about to learn that payback is a bitch." The lavish reception hall glistened with opulence, crystal chandeliers casting a warm glow over the impeccably dressed guests. Waiters glided by with trays of champagne flutes, the bubbles sparkling like liquid diamonds. It was a scene straight out of the lifestyles of the rich and famous, a far cry from my own humble roots. As I stood beside Jake at the altar, resplendent in my pristine white gown, I couldn't help but marvel at the extravagance surrounding us. This was the life I had coveted for so long, wealth, status, and all the trappings of the upper crust. Yet that fairy tale illusion was rapidly crumbling before my eyes. Richard caught my gaze from the front row, his expression one of poorly veiled disdain. He had begrudgingly signed off on the wedding after I agreed to his draconian prenup, but his contempt still radiated like a noxious cloud. I felt Jake tense beside me, no doubt sensing the palpable tension in the air. The ceremony droned on, the officiant's words fading into a dull murmur as my focus zeroed in on Marcus. He gave me the slightest of nods, his eyes glinting with steely determination. Our moment of reckoning was nigh. As Jake and I exchanged rings, the grand double doors at the back of the hall burst open with a resonant bang. All heads swiveled as Marcus strode down the aisle, brandishing a thick manila envelope overhead. "Sorry for the rude interruption, folks," he announced, his voice ringing with cold clarity. "But before this farce continues, I believe the guests deserve to know exactly who they're celebrating." Gasps and murmurs rippled through the crowd as Marcus tore open the envelope, extracting the first of many damning documents. For years, Richard Hollister has portrayed himself as a pillar of moral fortitude and philanthropic generosity. Marcus's gaze locked onto the stunned patriarch. But I've uncovered a paper trail that proves his empire was built on lies, corruption, and moral bankruptcy. One by one, Marcus unveiled the sordid findings, records of insider trading, embezzlement, illicit affairs with subordinates, and more. The crowd's shock escalated into a crescendo of outrage as the enormity of the revelations sank in. Richard was on his feet now, face mottled in apoplectic rage. "You insolent worms! How dare you propagate these slanderous lies against me?" But the evidence was irrefutable, laid bare for all to see. His carefully cultivated facade was crumbling, the veil of propriety torn asunder to expose the repugnant truth lurking beneath. Jake turned to me, his expression a mask of stunned betrayal. "Ava, what have you done?" Before I could respond, a commotion erupted near the entrance as two burly security guards flanked a wild-eyed Richard. "Get your hands off me, you imbeciles," he sputtered, struggling against their iron grip. "This is an outrage, a travesty." As they hauled him away, his veneer of composure shattered completely. "You'll all pay for this humiliation, every last one of you, treacherous snakes." His words dissolved into incoherent sputtering as the guards dragged him out, his legacy disintegrating into ashes around him. The once mighty Richard Hollister, unceremoniously dethroned by the very woman he had derided as beneath his contempt. A deafening silence descended over the hall as the gravity of the moment sank in. I turned to survey the stunned assembly, my chest swelling with a heady concoction of triumph and vindication. The debt had finally been paid in full. The aftermath of Richard's spectacular downfall was a whirlwind of chaos and recrimination. As the shocked guests dispersed, the once opulent reception hall took on the air of a dilapidated ruin, the shattered remnants of grandeur strewn about like tragic vestiges of a fallen empire. Jake rounded on me, his expression a mask of barely contained fury. "How could you do this, Ava? Destroy everything we've built together with your twisted need for vengeance?" I opened my mouth to respond, but he barreled on, his words lashing out like a whip. "My father was right about you all along. You're nothing but a scheming opportunist out for our money and status." The accusations stung, but I refused to back down. "Your father brought this on himself with his reprehensible behavior. I'm done being treated like a second-class citizen, Jake. If you can't see that, then we have nothing left to say to each other." His nostrils flared, jaw clenched in impotent rage. For a fleeting moment, I saw a glimmer of the man I'd fallen for, the charming, good-natured soul who had swept me off my feet. But it was quickly extinguished, smothered by the twisted ideology of superiority he'd inherited from his disgraced patriarch. "Then I guess this is goodbye," he spat, ripping off his tuxedo jacket and flinging it to the ground in disgust. "I hope you and your low-life brother enjoy gloating over your hollow victory. You've just flushed your last chance at a better life down the drain." With that parting salvo, he stormed off, leaving me standing amidst the wreckage of what was supposed to be the happiest day of my life. A hollow ache blossomed in my chest as the finality of our shattered relationship sank in. Marcus materialized at my side, his expression a mixture of grim satisfaction and concern. "You okay, sis? That was one hell of a bombshell to drop." I let out a shuddering breath, willing my turbulent emotions into submission. "I'll be fine. Just getting some much-needed closure, I suppose." His arm draped around my shoulders, offering a reassuring squeeze. "For what it's worth, I'm proud of you for standing your ground. The Hollisters had this karmic reckoning coming for a long time." I nodded, my gaze drifting to the ornate double doors where Jake had stormed out mere moments ago. A part of me still clung to the naive hope that he would see reason, that the man I loved was still in there somewhere beneath the toxic conditioning. But his vehement rejection, coupled with the searing finality of his parting words, told a different story. This was the point of no return. By dismantling the Hollister empire, I had irrevocably severed all ties to that world of privilege and status I had so desperately coveted. The dream was officially over, replaced by what? A future that was as terrifyingly uncertain as it was exhilaratingly wide open. As Marcus and I made our way out of the decimated reception hall, I couldn't help but feel a strange sense of lightness amidst the emotional turbulence. The shackles of oppression, the constant need to contort myself into someone more palatable to the elite, had finally been shattered. For the first time in my life, I was beholden to no one but myself. And that realization was more intoxicating than any amount of wealth or prestige the Hollister name could offer. 6 months had passed since the cataclysmic unraveling of the Hollister dynasty, and my life had taken an unexpected but oddly fulfilling detour. Gone were the days of desperately chasing acceptance from the elite, of contorting myself into someone I wasn't just for a taste of their rarefied air. Instead, I had channeled my newfound freedom into pursuing my own entrepreneurial ambitions. With a small loan from Marcus and an ironclad determination to blaze my own trail, I had opened a quaint little cafe in the heart of the city. Nothing fancy, just good food, friendly service, and a warm, welcoming atmosphere, the antithesis of the Hollisters' cold, ostentatious trappings. As I surveyed the lunchtime rush, smiling at the cheerful chatter and aroma of freshly brewed coffee that permeated the air, I couldn't help but marvel at how far I'd come. No more walking on eggshells, no more swallowing my pride for the sake of social climbing. This was my kingdom now, built from the ground up through sheer grit and perseverance. The tinkling of the front doorbell snapped me from my reverie. I glanced up and felt my breath catch in my throat. There, shuffling in with a haunted, defeated look, was Richard Hollister, or what remained of him. His once impeccable suit hung loosely on his withered frame, his eyes sunken and rimmed with fatigue. The mighty Titan had well and truly fallen, his reputation and empire lying in smoldering ruins. For a moment, our gazes locked, a silent acknowledgement passing between us. He knew I had orchestrated his downfall, just as I recognized the broken husk of a man before me as the architect of my own suffering. There was no need for words. The cosmic scales had been balanced, for better or worse. Richard slumped into a corner booth, shoulders sagging beneath an invisible weight. As I approached to take his order, a flicker of his former arrogance resurfaced. "Come to gloat, have you?" he rasped, his voice a reedy shadow of its once booming timbre. "Admire the devastation you've wrought on me and my family?" I studied him for a long moment, seeing not the sneering elitist who had derided me at every turn, but a pathetic, empty husk. Revenge, once so intoxicating in its inevitability, suddenly felt hollow and unfulfilling. "I'm not here to gloat, Richard," I said at last. "Just to take your order, if you're still welcome here." His brows knitted in confusion, as if he couldn't quite process the olive branch I was extending. For so long we had been locked in an endless cycle of escalating hostilities that the concept of civility was now utterly foreign. Finally he gave a weary nod. Just a black coffee, then." As I turned to leave, his gravelly voice stopped me. "You've won, you know. Taken everything from me, my business, my reputation, my family." A rueful chuckle escaped his cracked lips. "I don't even know who I am anymore without all of that." I looked back at him, feeling an unexpected pang of sadness amidst the hard-won sense of victory. Here was a man who had tied his entire identity to his material trappings, never realizing how empty and meaningless it all was until everything had been stripped away. "Maybe that's not such a bad thing," I heard myself saying. "A chance to start over, to find value in something other than old money and status." Richard's gaze was inscrutable as I walked away, leaving him to ponder my words and the hollow remnants of the life he had once clung to so desperately. As for me, I had found my rebirth, a new existence forged from the ashes of the old. And while the journey had been devastating, the freedom and self-determination I now possessed made every hardship worthwhile. The debt was paid, the scales finally balanced. Now it was time to flourish on my own terms.